First of all, I would like to thank to the organizers, especially to Filippo, for inviting me to what promised to be a very interesting conference about monsters. And second, I have to apologize for my English accent. I'm not a good English speaker. Point 1, introduction. The biopolitical perspective initiated by Michel Foucault highlights the limitation of traditional categories of political philosophy to explicate power relations. As Foucault notes, power produces things, it induces pleasure, forms knowledge, produces discourses. It needs to be considered as a productive network which runs through the whole social body, much more than as a negative instance whose function is repression. End of quote. Thus, power is exercised throughout society. It can produce subjects and subjectivities. Based on this point, I consider that monstrosity is a political category that allows us to conceive the way in which biopower produces subjectivities. Monstrosity can be understood in two ways. In the negative sense, it can be taken as subjectivities that are the negative converse of the useful and docile bodies. Consequently, monstrosity becomes an objective of biopower that aims to neutralize and eliminate it. Monstrosity, however, can also be taken in a positive sense, as subjectivities that resist appropriation by biopower and create life in common. Thus, the monstrosity category reveals a semantic ambiguity. It is composed by an inherent tension between the negative and the positive meaning. These are related by the exercise of power in a specific direction. For the former orientation, the negative one, we can use the expression politics over monstrosity, stressing over, and politics of monstrosity, highlighting off for the negative direction. In this presentation, I am going to focus on politics over monstrosity, that is, on some subjectivities that are constituted by the power as dangerous or as monsters. Although these subjectivities can be seen as a way of life, a negative way of life, which can be recognized, for example, in the expressions life without value, outlined by George Agamben, or the non-graveable life according to Judith Butler. I would like to recall here an old metaphor which enables us to understand the inherent relation between state and monstrosity when monstrosity is introduced in the state. I am referring to the werewolf metaphor, which summarizes the meaning of homo homini lupus, man is a wolf to man, a sentence used by Thomas Hobbes, whereby I will focus on the monstrosity that the human being represents and not on the Leviathan, which is usually recognized as a political monster. Hobbes' thoughts are relevant from a biopolitical perspective due to the fact that he was the first philosopher to point out the direct relation between life and politics. Politics is perceived as a protection against a violent death, which is the cause of fear among men. It is from the fear of being murdered, which can be interpreted as political existentialism, that men create the civil state. I do not intend to analyze Hobbes' political theory, but rather look at the werewolf figure, which allows us to understand monstrosity from a biopolitical paradigm. This figure has traditionally been understood as a mix of species, a combination of human and beast, and in this sense, as Jeffrey Cohen indicates, the werewolf can expresses the radical difference between man and beast, or a hesitation during which what is supposed to be contrastive remains coexistent, indifferent. In this presentation, I will consider the werewolf as a challenge to the human being norm, insofar as a transgression of civil law. According to Foucault, we can characterize the werewolf monstrosity as a political monster rather than a juridical biological monster. I think that the werewolf can show us, on the one hand, how the wolf becomes man, citizen, with the creation of the state, and on the other hand, how the man becomes wolf, the constant threat of lubrification of man. It is this later direction of becoming that is fundamental for understanding monstrosity in a negative way, and also enable us to answer the fundamental question, the enigma of biopolitics, how it is possible that a power of life is exercised against life itself. If we can observe the possibility that man becomes wolf within the political order, we can recognize that Hobbes' discourse of sovereignty aims to neutralize this transformation of the werewolf. For Roberto Esposito, this neutralization can be seen as an immunity, the refractoriness of an organism that, to the danger of contracting a contagious disease. In this sense, I would like to demonstrate that the werewolf operates both as poison and antidote, that is, as pharmacon within the state. The immunization sheds light on the biopolitical paradigm, which articulates biopower and sovereign power, that is, a power destined to increase, to intensify, to multiply, and to defend life. In summary, that makes live. However, it can also deny life, it makes death, which must be understood not only as direct killing, but also as indirect death, the act of exposing someone to death or of neutralization. Esposito's contribution in this perspective is the discovery that the nexus between life and politics is immunological. In light of the aforementioned, it could be said that modern rationality exhibits a composition between a repressive regime represented by the juridical discourse, as well as productive regime represented by the biopower discourse. Although modern political subjectivity and the government of the population are aligned with different paradigms, it is possible to recognize their complementarity and articulation between subject of law and productive body, in other words, between people and population. The political monster emerges from the articulation of both regimes of power. There is a complementary relation between them, according to the principle to make live is also to exercise the right to kill. It is true that we have to wait until the 18th century for the emergence of the technology of power orientated toward the individual body, the disciplines, and toward the body species, the biopolitics, in order to consider monstrosity as a way of subjectivity, as a configuration of the body and life. Despite this, Hobbes' discourse about sovereignty is relevant as it allows us to show monstrosity in a metaphorical sense. The werewolf analysis from a biopolitical point of view enables us to understand that monstrosity does not have a position of exteriority in relation to power. On the contrary, it is included in the political order. Point 2, the werewolf. Hobbes writes in the Cive or the Chive book that anticipates some themes of the Leviathan, the famous sentence that man to man is a kind of God and that man to man is an arrant wolf. According to the author, the first is true if we compare citizens among themselves, and the second if we compare cities. As As observed Carl Schmitt, this expression was formulated by Bacon Berulamio, and it means that in the civil state, man is to man a god, homine deus, whereas in the state of nature, man is to man a wolf, homo homini lupus. Thereby, Hobbes indicates the transformation that is produced in man with the social contract, that is, the transition from man-beast to man-god. In other words, in the state of nature, man is an animal, a wolf, and when man creates the civil state, he becomes more than a simple man, he becomes a citizen. As we can see, Hobbes uses the expression homo homini lupus to refer to the state of nature, but if we understand this sentence as per the werewolf metaphor, it is possible to recognize its function in the civil state. In accordance with the old popular mythology of the lycanthropy, the change of man or woman into the form of a wolf can be through magical means or through judgment of the gods in punishment for some great offense. This transformation can be permanent or temporary, but in any case, the werewolf figure reveals a threshold and at the same time a transition between man and beast. I want to highlight with the werewolf metaphor the metamorphosis and the reversibility that it exposes. Although the werewolf is located in an undifferentiated area between man and beast, it is all the same possible to distinguish two movements diametrically opposed in the werewolf metamorphosis. On the one hand, the transition from wolf to man, that is, from the man in the state of nature to a citizen in the civil state, that we can denominate wolf becoming man. Then, on the other hand, the transformation from man to wolf, that is to say, the man in the civil state that becomes wolf, that we can designate man becoming wolf. Yet in neither case is it a complete transition. On the contrary, the werewolf represents a tension between these two directions. As we know, Hobbes' philosophical juridical discourse indicates an excision between the pre-political moment and the political moment, between the state of nature and the civil state, even though the state of nature is a description of a purely hypothetical situation. This stage allows Hobbes to conceive the cause of the origin and foundation of the state. The state of nature is composed of men that are like wolves to other men, but when the civil state is established, the men abandon their wolf condition and become citizens. In other words, with the creation of this state, men do not only leave their state of nature, but they also leave their wolf characters. The werewolf metaphor suggests the transition from beast to man, but contrary to Hobbes' radical distinction between wolf in the state of nature and citizen in the civil state, the werewolf metamorphosis is never complete. Hence, this reversibility of this mutation is always possible. In this sense, the wolf becoming man, which characterized man's condition in the civil state, can be converted into man becoming wolf, which indicates the return of man to the state of nature. At this point, I would like to emphasize that the werewolf metaphor highlights a threshold between physis and nomos, between state of nature and civil state. For this reason, the man that becomes wolf is not completely separated from the community of men. He remains within the community, because with the establishment of the civil state, the state of nature is not abandoned. On the contrary, the state of nature is preserved within the community. In this sense, the hostility that exists in the state of nature does not end with the formation of the state, but is maintained as a founding link of the relation among men. The hostility remains in the civil state. As a consequence, man is like a wolf to other men. In this way, the Hobbesian expression homo homini lupus can be extrapolated toward the interior of the political community. It is on the basis of the man becoming wolf metamorphosis that the Leviathan is legitimized in relation to the notion of security, the great monster that must subjugate the little monsters, the werewolves. We should understand this transformation from man to wolf not only as someone who effectively breaks the law, but also as someone who can transgress it. It is this possibility, the capacity of transgressing the law, that permanently puts the political order's stability at risk, and at the same time threatens to spread throughout the political body. This means that each man, simple by being a werewolf, can turn into a wolf. It is for this reason that the Leviathan not only reacts against an effective transgression, but also in opposition to a possible transgression. In this way, all men are dangerous to the state, or in a more specific sense, they are potentially dangerous. The Leviathan must limit this explicit enmity. It must prevent the hostility from transforming into an excessive violence, i.e., that men become actual wolves. The way to mitigate the violence among men is opposing a greater violence from which the Leviathan is the legitimate behavior. The Leviathan calms the werewolf violence with its right to punish, and in extreme case, its right to kill. It is only through the constant threat of punishment that the state can contain the violence caused by the hostility among men. Paradoxically, the werewolf violence can only be contained through their inclusion within the juridical system. In this way, the Leviathan anticipates and predicts the violence that can be caused by the werewolf. As this metamorphosis is possible, the man becoming wolf is included in the political juridical discourse. The werewolf is included to prevent its actual transformation. This does not mean that Hobbes' intention of neutralizing the conflict does not persist. On the contrary, the possibility of neutralizing the conflict does not mean its complete elimination, but instead its incorporation in the political order in a specific way. The neutralization occurs when the conflict is included, but in small doses. This leads us to paradigm of immunization, which involves the idea, as Esposito says, that an attenuated form of infection could protect against a more virulent form of the same type. From here comes the deduction that the inoculation of non-lethal quantities of a virus stimulates the formation of antibodies that are able to neutralize pathogenic effects at an early stage. End of quote. In this sense, the acquired immunity reproduced in a controlled form exactly what it is meant to protect us from. In other words, protects life not in a frontal way, but rather through outflanking and neutralization. According to the immunitarian logic, I consider that the werewolf figure can be understood as pharmakon. As Jacques Derrida notes, for the Greeks, this pharmakon, this medicine, this filter, which acts as both remedy and poison, already introduced itself into the body of the discourse with all its ambivalence. This charm, this spellbinding virtue, this power of fascination can be alternative or simultaneously beneficent or maleficent. End of quote. Thus, the werewolf operates both as poison and as antidote within the state. As we have seen, the logic behind the Hobbesian discourse is immunization from the werewolf, because of the potential threat that man becomes wolf to the political juridical order, must include the werewolf as a juridical immunization. As Esposito expresses, the same claim of the law to provide for all acts that may contradict life by penalizing them place it in an anticipatory position, with the result that life is both protected and prejudiced. End of quote. In this sense, the Leviathan aims to prevent and contain the man becoming wolf, assuming the exclusive right to punishment. In this way, the werewolf produces an inoculation with a therapeutical function. It is a dose of the same poison from which the state seeks to protect itself. Despite this, the Leviathan cannot stop this metamorphosis in all werewolves, and this puts the state at risk because it is a mortal god, and therefore can be killed. However, the Leviathan can tolerate it in small doses, and in these cases, it can exercise its right to punish. The violence unleashed by the werewolf is repressed with greater violence. The Leviathan tries in this way to avoid the propagation, the spread of the man becoming wolf, because the Leviathan is not threatened by the werewolf as an isolated individual, but by the werewolf, the multiplicity. In this sense, I would like to point out that if the Leviathan was traditionally understood as the coldest of cold monsters, as Friedrich Nietzsche said, then a cold monster that stands up in front of us can for this reason be understood as a metaphor of transcendent power. On the contrary, the werewolf metaphor indicates that monstrosity is immanent to the power. The later metaphor reveals that the monster is not external to the political order, but included within it. In agreement with Antonio Negri, it is the immanence of the monster that makes the power fragile and fearful. At this point, we can note the paradoxical nature of the relation between the Leviathan and the werewolf. The Leviathan must include the werewolf within the political juridical order. In this way, the werewolf is an antigen, a non-lethal dose of death. This inclusion enabled the state to punish and to prevent the man becoming wolf, but at the same time, this is the thing that also jeopardizes the continuity of the state, because the Leviathan cannot stop this metamorphosis in all werewolves. If the mutation from man to wolf expands, that is, if the spread of men becoming wolf increases, then the Leviathan can be killed by the same antigen that it has inoculated itself against. Point 3, conclusion. The immunization concept, as Esposito shows, indicates an indivisible unity, an intrinsic relation between bios and nomos, between life and politics. The immunization paradigm allows us to understand that the relation between protection and denial of life and its relation with the power orientation, that is, with the production of life and the production of death. These two effects of power are articulated in an internal relation. Immunization is a negative form of the protection of life. Hobbes' philosophical juridical discourse thereby enabled us to analyze the werewolf metaphor as pharmacon, poison and antidote for the civil state. This metaphor involves two metamorphoses. On the one hand, the wolf that becomes man with the creation of the Leviathan, and on the other hand, the man that becomes wolf, the permanent threat of lupification that involves men. The werewolf metaphor not only indicates the mutation, but also the threshold between beast and man. For this reason, in the civil state, man does not completely abandon his world condition. This situation allows us to extrapolate toward the interior of the political community the Hobbesian expression homo homini lupus. The mere possibility that man become wolf in the civil state is a threat to the Leviathan. As a consequence, the Leviathan assumes the right of life and death. However, this exercise of sovereign power, with reference to the right to kill, can only be applied to a limited number of werewolves. On the contrary, the Leviathan could suppress itself. It is the spread of the man becoming wolf which endangers the continuity of the state. For this reason, the Leviathan is forced to incorporate the werewolf in the political juridical order as a way to prevention to the effect of juridical immunization. Thus, the werewolf operates as a pharmacon. It is an antigen that in small doses can be tolerated by the Leviathan, and in this way it is immunized against it. And it is even in this way that the Leviathan is legitimized. But if the number of men that become wolf increases to a large extent, the dose can be lethal for the Leviathan. This in two ways. On the one hand, because the werewolf can kill the Leviathan, and on the other hand, because this immunity strategy can become autoimmunity. The importance of Hobbes' thoughts is that it enables us to observe in modernity how the self-preservation of life is the basis for the other political categories, such as sovereignty, liberty, property. From a biopolitical point of view, as Esposito notes, these categories are in relation to the idea of order. Therefore, power is understood as transcendental. It is in the Nazi regime, when the immediate relation between life and politics is produced, that it is possible to perceive an inherent relation between biology and politics. As a consequence, when the relation between life and power is mediated, the monstrosity appears as a metaphor. But when this is an immediate relation, the monstrosity becomes a form of subjectivity. This can be seen in the Nazi regime with the construction of the Jews as monsters. It can also be seen more recently, for example, with the undesired immigrant population and its correlative criminalization, and with some local groups that are criminalized because of their skin color, the way they look, and their culture. These are some of the new monsters that the state can tolerate, but at the same they can put the state at risk. Maybe the power to prove the weakness of the Leviathan power lies with these new monsters. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, very good. A lot of space to Thomas Hobbes, of course, working this paper and this morning.
Yeah.
I'd like to throw for a question. We have plenty of time. Do you have any question? Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for the paper. It was really interesting.
Okay, thank you.
I'm also trying to think through very similar questions. So, one thing that kept coming up was maybe the difference between, or the relation between disciplinary power and biopower mentality. Because you were mentioning, well, with the whole discussion of Hobbes and the relation of course, like werewolves and Leviathan, one thing that seems to occur is rather like individualization somehow of like a werewolf and its relation to Leviathan. Mm-hmm. In order for Leviathan to basically, to exercise its power to kill, Leviathan would have to somehow individualize the werewolf, and that would be, or like a concept such as juridical immunization would require power to be able to pick who will be killed, or who will be left out, or who will be made dead. Whereas biopower seems to be, like, as it is making power, making life, it is much more of a regulatory, like it works through statistics, it works through all of these like scales and everything, less on the basis of the juridical basis and more on the like very biological, very medicinal basis. So I was wondering how you would deal with that relationship.
Yes, I think that this is it's not my perspective, but I think that is the reading that the Italian Biopolitica do about Foucault, and I don't know, Esposito, Negri, and Agamben, they see that the biopolitical, the power is related with the sovereign power, because it's the only way that you have, that you can explain the right to kill, and this happen in our societies, and in this sense that they are, of course, are two different perspectives. The right to kill and the right to make live, but in this perspective, they are related. I don't know if I.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand. Like they're always related.
Yes.
Just like people always mention stuff. Yeah, they're always related. It's just like.
In our societies, I come from Argentina and Latin America, and the state have a strong presence in our life, and not always in a positive sense, and sometimes it happens when I refer to these groups that are excluded. I refer to my own population that a lot of times within our country is excluded for the skin color, because I don't know, some population is more dark than I am, and they are discriminated in my own country, and I don't know, for that reason is that you can see this articulation in the exercise of the power all the time. But, yeah. Sorry for my English. It's terrible, I know. I know, it's terrible.
Fabio, sorry for my English. Is there anyone?
Sorry.
Okay, I try to summarize your argument.
Yeah.
You say that the state of nature is present in the state of civil life,
Yeah.
and this is the cause of the biopolitics of the state, of the creation of the monster. This is, to summarize it in a drastic manner, the monster is immanent to the state because the monster is the nature in the civil life. No?
Yeah.
The disorder in that is impossible to order, definitely.
Yeah.
No?
In a
More or
sense,
less.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Then I have a problem with the notion of state.
Okay.
Because you say
I have a
that,
problem with the state.
okay, we have a problem. Because you say that there is a two-pronged politics. On the one side, the state carries out the politics of punishment.
Yeah.
On the other side, politics of inclusion. I understand
Yeah.
what you mean with
In a
punishment,
sense.
but
Yeah.
no, you used the word inclusion.
Yeah.
What is inclusion for you? That is, I try to explain. The Leviathan, that is the state or the theory of of the state in the 17th century is a thing, and the state in the Nazi state is another thing. But you said, I had the impression that for you state is something that is between these two poles. That is, the Nazi state is the truth in Hegelian terms of the Leviathan. No? The biological power is the revelation, so to say, so to speak, of an immanent truth of the state. But is a politics of inclusion possible that is not simply this politics of immunization that you spoke about?
Yeah, of course, it isn't exactly in a historical sense. This is an extrapolation. It's only an idea about the state in a general sense, not in a strict sense, the difference between the state that Hobbes sought and the state of the Nazi regime, on our state that are different between Europeans and Latin Americans. Of course, the state, the word state is very wide. And I only try to think not in the state that Hobbes proposed, but in the conception of the individuals that I think that is similar. And I think that this idea to prevention and predicts the behavior to the individuals is the logic that the state have now, and this is the way that the policial order function in our societies, and they have to prevent the behavior because all behavior is potentially dangerous for the state or for other men. I don't know if only in this sense I would try to not refer to the Leviathan as this metaphor, but the werewolf, the individuals. And I think that the problem for the state is if not the individual in the sense that the singular, but the plural. When this werewolf and this man becoming wolf construct or create communities, and this is potentially dangerous for the state. Of course, this vision is a negative vision about the monster. It's not that I think that these groups are potential for resist this power, but I only in this presentation I only refer to the politics over monstrosity and the construct of the monstrosity in a negative sense. But I think that exists this reversibility and the possibility that these monsters, this negative monster for the vision of the state, can be communities that can resist to the power and create communities with other relation, not in the individual sense, but with other relation as a life in common. Yeah.
No, there's something to add, but
I don't know if.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As well. There's really a lot to talk about, think about. First, in the beginning of your paper, you were saying how Hobbes represents the first instance of essentially biopolitics, how he brings together the political man and life.
Yeah.
I think that is a very dubious claim, and this is actually pretty much Derrida's critique of Gambit. The Gambit being the first who wants to say who the first is, and so on. And that actually accounts for things. If we go back into Plato, we can actually, you were using the word pharmacon from Derrida again. This is Plato. And it's not just the pharmacology of Plato, but it's actually also his animal metaphors. We can pretty much read half of his work, of Plato's work, as a discourse on animals and life, on wolves, on sheep, the philosopher dog, and so on. You can go further back, maybe into Heraclitus and other Socrates, and see, politics and life coming together there. So it's very difficult if you try and put like a moment in time. So that's the first instance. But something that actually does happen is the transformation of lycanthropy itself. So the notion of the transformation of man into wolf changes from ancient times, where it's thought of more as a disease, where the person who becomes a wolf is actually suffering, and its victims are sheep. It's not man. The victim of the wolf is not man. So it's something that the lycanthrope suffers. And then by Holstein, we have the werewolf being a threat to humanity. So this transformation, I think, is quite important there. And I would like, if there's a lot of points where I'm just, and I would like you to only maybe make a comment or repeat what you said about Schmidt and Hobbes, where you say, he actually goes back into the references behind the citation. But actually, this citation comes from A. Plautus, and then B. Cicero. So man is a go-to-man is Cicero. Is Plautus. This comes from a comedy read. And the context there is very important. And I'm just wondering what Schmidt has to say exactly, where.
I don't know. Yeah, I think that are different interpretations about who was the first person that enunciate this sentence. And I only, because, for example, if you read the last letter of Derrida, I don't know the name, The Beast and the Sovereign, he referred to other author. I don't remember exactly who was for him. And yeah, I think that is a discussion who was the first that referred to the Homo homini lupus, but I don't know. I only referred to the Schmidt, and he said that was Bacon Verulamio, who was?
Yeah, who was it?
Bacon Verulamio.
Francis Bacon.
Bacon. Yeah. But I don't know.
Well, it exists also in Erasmus. Erasmus is a discussion.
Yeah.
But also.
But I don't know.
It does exist in Plautus, in his Comedy of Asses.
Yes. But I don't know if in this sense, as Homo homini lupus.
Yeah, and actually it goes on and says when he goes on and says when a man is unknown to another man when he doesn't know who he is. So he says a man is a wolf to another man when he doesn't know who he is.
Yeah.
And that is quite important to also take into account.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was just trying to see, okay, what Schmidt has to say, but...
yeah, maybe I have to check it.
It's very important, however, I think, to refer this discourse further back. And Machiavelli as well, who could be featuring here in our opening panel, has a lot to say about wolves, lions, foxes, and then...
Okay, Andrea.
Yeah, about the kind of paradigm we use to situate Hobbes between sovereignty and control using Foucault's framework. We might maybe add to Foucault the identification of Hobbes as typical of the sovereignty paradigm. We might use the concept of disciplinarity, because there we see something that is already in Hobbes as an entire disciplinary apparatus that he elaborates in the second part, the third and fourth part of the Leviathan. And this, I think, still works. Still, I say, well, I agree with what you were saying. I mean, I don't see what Esposito sees in Hobbes, because I see no injection of monstrosity by the state. I mean, there's no biopolitical in this sense, biopolitical, not in the disciplinary sense, which is already something like biopolitics, but in the sense of the injection of the monsters. There's nothing like that in Hobbes. I mean, I cannot see that. I don't know where Esposito takes this idea from. I mean, I suppose he wants to find something in Hobbes which is not there. it is not there because there's no biological life in the sense we understand it in us. Because life is mechanical motion. It's not metamorphosis, nothing like that. The point is that the natural motion is not of human beings is not fit for the artificial, for the dimension of the artificial collective motion for the state. Men are not fit for big societies. They are fit for a kind of individual relationship, and they can become werewolves, one to the other. And the problem is to make this kind of natural motion fit for the collective motion, which is common and not state. And in this sense, if we can read back to the key of this introduction, man is God to man or work to man, we might have Schmidt that. We might add a kind of Schmittian turn to this reading, because there Hobbes says that he doesn't say that man is wolf to wolf in the state of nature. He said that the state is wolf to the state.
Yeah.
Well, the citizen is God to the citizen. And in this sense, this is quite Schmittian, because you have to project monstrosity, aggressivity outside in order to have it controlled in the inside. You have to form a kind of collective enemy in order not to allow aggressivity to come out from the inside of the state. I don't know if Schmidt, I don't know if you remember what he says about that. I don't because he says from this sentence he extrapolates this idea that man is wolf to man concerns the states of nature, but I don't know if he goes further and says that this is in the relationship between states, not between men. Do you remember that?
No, not exactly, but in any case, I think that, of course, my presentation isn't. I'm not doing, or I'm not did an uncritical or an analysis about the Hobbes theory. I remark that I would like to read, or in this sense, close to Esposito, read Hobbes from a biopolitical perspective, and of course has a lot of problems do that, because it's a period before anterior. But I only remark this metamorphosis not for think in the Hobbes propose, but for think in our states. This is the thing that I try to do. I don't know if this is the point. This presentation isn't a work about Hobbes and their sovereign and their sovereign power. I don't want to do that. I only try to think in the conception that our state has about the individuals, and in this sense, I think that with this difference, with a lot of difference that the state that sought Hobbes and the state that we have now in this moment, the idea of individual, in a sense, is similar, and this is the idea that I want to express here, and this reversibility that this conception has, this metaphor has. I don't know if I...
Very good. Is there any other question? Alistair, that's you.
Two quick questions. If I've understood correctly, the sort of transition of wolf man into civil man, what sort of things might make that happen? Or bring it back the other way, from civil man to wolf man, what sorts of events might trigger that transitions, those transitions?
I don't understand.
I'm not sure I understood either.
Okay.
Can you repeat
I'll
quickly?
say it again. So Wolfman into
Yeah.
Civil Man, that sort of transition,
Yeah.
what makes that happen? And how does that work? And what would trigger the opposite from Civil Man into back to Wolfman?
Okay, I understand. Of course, the idea is that this wolf becoming man is, of course, a hypothetical direction, because really doesn't exist. The man born in the state, not in the state of nature, in the civil state, and for that reason, this direction is impossible to think, because we always live in the civil state. For that reason, I'm interested in the other way, the possibility that this man becoming wolf. And I think that this happened, this transformation, this mutation happened when some subjectivities are I don't know. The problem is that I think in a specific group that exists in my country, and it's very difficult to transmit the things that happen there. But I think that we have, from my point of view, the state has a conception that not all the population can be productive and docile, and the other population is marginalized. And of course the state don't kill them, but they kill in a metaphorical sense. They are excluded of the center of our city. They are excluded of the city. They are lives in marginalized quarters. And we have in my province, because I don't live in Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina. I live in another city that is in the middle of the country. We live Córdoba.
It's one of the most important.
Yeah, Vittorio was there.
Everyone knows Córdoba.
It's a sitiate city. We have a policial presence in all the city. It's very complicated to live there, and I think that for answer your question, I think that this group or this population that is marginalized in a moment that have I don't want to use the word conscious, because it's had a lot of problem, but in a moment they fight for their rights. They are excluded of the civil rights, and it's in the sense that they are becoming wolf, because we have they create a lot of aggregation that protest against the state and mobilizations, and it's a very political society and city, but at the same time it's a very controlling city.
So the state sort of stops interacting with these groups.
Yeah.
And that's when they revert
Yes,
back to
they, or I don't know how can I explain that, but years ago, we have in the city a different part of the Torrano, the partes de la occupied for families, and there was excluded of the city because the tourist person don't want to see them, and this is very complicated, and there are a lot of people, without any rights. They don't have hospitals, don't have schools, and it's a very extreme situation. And when I write this, I thought in these groups.
Thanks for a really interesting paper.
Okay.
I was really intrigued by your idea of the monster acting as a pharmacon for the state. And I'm wondering if you can speak more to or if you see this in a kind of a periodization. And I'm thinking, for instance, of Stuart Hall, some of his very early writings on moral panics as kind of preparing the ground for the introduction of new disciplinary technologies. Or, and I'm not really think of who's written on this specifically, but the sort of emerging argument on the neoliberal state that we've moved from a kind of a reactive, it's sort of collapse of the Foucauldian idea of a moral economy of punishment, where you wait for the crime to be committed and then you arrest somebody, now to a preemptive mode. A lot of the work I've done on the disciplining of children is, in the anticipation of a crime, something happens.
Yeah.
Or if you think about invasion of countries as a preemptive, well, they have weapons, so we think, so we're going in there. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how the nature of the pharmacon has shifted, or if that's something that you intended to look at.
Yeah, but because this is the problem is that I think in my city, and for example, our police, they call in English is CAP, is Command Action Prevention, and the police think that prevent the violence, to prevent, and the police has the power to detener, when you hold some people in the arbitrary way, and you go to the prison for 24 hours for antecedent averiguation, and this happen all the time, and this happen with young persons, because they have particularities. Yeah, and this happen all the time, and it's how can I say, sitiado, when the police is the policial presence in all the city. We live in a very controlled city with a helicopter all the time. In the night, we can see the lights in your garden, and it's very extreme. The policy is very arbitrary, the way that they function.
I guess I know we're running out of time, but I guess I'm thinking of just going back to the I forget who it was. We talked about the genealogy of lycanthropy.
Yeah.
If in fact you're seeing this transformation of the monster in these successive iterations historically. I'm describing one in a moment right now, which is also I'm from Toronto, and we have TABIS, which is the kind of preemptive, police will stop and ask for identification, usually of young black men, but they become known to police, and then they become entered into a whole technology where they're known to police, so if there's a crime committed, and but I'm wondering if if you're thinking about the sort of genealogy of these different moments of, if you want, there's something.
Sorry, I think that I don't understand
Is the
exactly.
moment you're describing in the city of Cordova?
Yeah.
At what point did that? Has it always existed in that particular way?
No,
As
no,
a
no.
preemptive? And
No,
what
this is
triggered it?
it is very strange because my country is a federalist country, and each province function in a different way than other. And my province, the security minister, they said that they copy the London model. I don't know, it's very strange, but this happened since 10 years, more or less, and each year is more aggressive, the politic of security. And the last year exists a mobilization organized for this young population that are marginalized. And the last mobilization, it was a lot of people that was to this mobilization, and it was the November 20, and I don't know, I think that it convocate 5,000 persons, and 10 days ago the police it was amotinate, and they generate a terrible chaos in our city. This provoke saqueos. I don't know, when the people go to the destroyings in the supermarkets, and the person kill, a lot of people die because that, and the police say, okay, we need it. It's necessary our presence in the city. You will see what happens if we don't, and I don't know.
Last question, Vittorio.
I think what you are saying is very interesting, but in relation to Argentina in particular.
Yeah.
Argentina has a history in the last 30 years, very interesting for so you had a dictatorship, a military dictatorship, and then a neoliberal power, and then what you can call left federalism. I don't know if you accept the definition.
Yeah, but
the state is always the same. I mean, you see the same politics. And what about classes? Because you are speaking of individuals and state and community out of the state. But what about the politics in the state against some classes on some other classes? Because I think there is some difference in the
different areas.
See, for example, against relative
landowner.
The politics that Christina and
the problem is that
against this kind of,
I can understand.
of political, of economical power.
Yeah. The problem is that our country is federalist, and we have a national government that is left, if we can say that, I don't know, the left, but in my province, the government is the right, the very right, and for that reason, it's opposing to the national government, are in confront this, both are Peronists, but one of the right and the other of left. This only happened in Argentina, and
this is very important to understand, because
But we
a
have-
European can think that
Yeah.
Cordoba is Argentina and the
No.
politics in Cordoba is
No.
the politics that you
No, for that reason I said that it's a federalist country, and yeah, we have a lot. Exists a division between the Peronists, between the right and the left, and in our province we are persons that are disappear in democracy because our government is the right. ¿Está bien decir? ¿Sí? ¿Posso dire di diritto?
Yeah.
The right, but it's a democratic government, not dictatorship. But happen similar things that when we had dictatorships. And this happened. A lot of persons, for example, you go for the street and the police cut you, and you disappear. And if you have lucky for 24 hours, but sometimes for 3-4 days, the family no happen what occurs with this person is very complicated, this city. And yeah.
Okay. Shall we enjoy fresh coffee and tea? So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.